My name is Maurice Tomkinson, and in this short video I'd like to explain why I've started taking climate change very seriously. We may have been lulled into a false sense of security over the amount of time we have to act and the impact the changes will have. I'd like to start by explaining the evidence that shocked me into action. When I think about our planet, I tend to get an image something like this. But for this talk I'd like to tilt it over and look at it from the North Pole, which now looks something like this. As you can see, the top of our planet, the Arctic, is not solid at all. It contains an ocean which is surrounded by Greenland, Canada, Alaska and the Siberian region of Russia. Down at the bottom you can see the British Isles. I used to think that the North Pole was on solid ground. I'd no idea that it was in the middle of an ocean. That was until I started investigating tipping points. A tipping point is where you put something under pressure until eventually it flips into a new state. From then on it's hard, if not impossible, to get back to the original state. Our bodies are a bit like that. We can put ourselves under pressure for years and years. They will keep on absorbing that pressure until one day something breaks down and we get ill. Once we're ill with something like diabetes or heart disease, it can be very hard to get back to the state of health again. Something similar is happening to our planet, and it's in the Arctic that the symptoms are most obvious. One of the problems with change at the planetary scale is that it can happen very slowly, so it's easy to believe we've got plenty of time to sort it out, or it won't happen in our lifetime. However, these changes are happening much faster than predicted. The Arctic Ocean used to be covered with ice all year round, but now the ice cover is declining rapidly. Instead of a solid sheet of ice, there are now times when storms can break up the ice sheet, and you can see water at the North Pole. Less ice in the Arctic Ocean means that the seabed and the surrounding land can warm up more rapidly, releasing methane that has been trapped in the frozen ice called permafrost for thousands if not millions of years. Releasing methane is like letting the genie out of the bottle where it's been trapped, except that once you've let it out there's no way to put it back. Methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. Releasing 1 unit of methane is equivalent to releasing over 100 units of carbon dioxide, and there's an awful lot of methane trapped in the Arctic ice. Measurements are showing much higher levels of it in the atmosphere than in the past. This graph shows a steady year-on-year increase in methane levels, but notice the readings in green. These are unexpected measurements that are way above the average. One possible reason for these anomalies might be that in parts of Siberia, huge blowholes have appeared in the Arctic tundra. Below ground, there are huge reserves of ancient methane trapped in the permafrost. As the ground warms and the ice starts to melt, the methane is able to escape. Pressure builds underground till the methane bursts through the ice, blasting out the large craters that we see and escaping into the atmosphere. Melting is also happening on the seabed. In the Laptev Sea, which is part of the Arctic Ocean, plumes of methane have been discovered rising to the surface, again releasing methane into the atmosphere. Huge numbers of meltwater lakes are forming as rising temperatures allow the ice of the tundra to melt in the spring. As the organic material under these lakes decays, yet more methane and carbon dioxide is released. In parts of Alaska, people are filming themselves making holes in the ice that covers lakes and setting fire to the methane gas that's been trapped just below the surface. As I said, methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. You will see figures of 25 times quoted, but these are very misleading as they are an average taken over decades. When methane is first released, it's over 100 times more potent than carbon dioxide. This is why researchers are very worried about the potential for methane release, calling it the methane time bomb. Once methane starts to be released in quantity, it will swamp the man-made release of carbon dioxide. We would have runaway global warming, and no amount of emission control would stop it. The scientists who are most closely involved with Arctic climate research are very worried that this runaway stage may already have been reached. When floating ice melts, it doesn't affect sea levels. But when ice sheets on land melt, the water runs into the oceans and contributes to sea levels rising. This is what's happening in Greenland right now. It's hard to imagine how much water is locked up in the Greenland ice sheet. It's 2 to 3 kilometres thick, and if it all melted, sea levels would rise by 7 metres. That's 23 feet. Greenland's ice sheet is melting rapidly. As it melts, it sends fresh water and icebergs into the ocean, which travel down into the North Atlantic and are currently forming a large pool of cold water that is disrupting the Gulf Stream circulation. This is having two main effects. The warm water of the Gulf Stream is getting trapped on the east coast of America, causing sea levels there to rise. On the European side of the Atlantic, the Gulf Stream is held up by the cold pool, causing it to slow down. These effects cause temperature gradients, which may account for the extreme rainfall and flooding that have been experienced over the winter in the UK. Another factor that impacts our weather is the jet stream, a circulating pattern of air that flows around the globe in the northern hemisphere. As the Arctic warms, the behaviour of the jet stream is changing. It's slowing down and meandering more. This is not only leading to rapidly changing weather in Europe and North America, it's also allowing warmer air to penetrate into the high Arctic. This is bad news because it means the Arctic itself is warming up. Over the last 2 winters, the Arctic has been 6 or 7 degrees centigrade warmer than normal. So although the average global temperature has only risen by 1 degree, the increase in the Arctic is greatly amplified, an effect that then causes more ice to melt. As the Greenland ice sheet melts and runs off into the Atlantic, Greenland is getting lighter. It's actually rising slightly, which is having the effect of triggering earthquakes underneath the Arctic Ocean. And scientists are concerned that these earthquakes could trigger the release of even more methane. Although I've just been talking about the Arctic, this region has such a powerful effect on the climate of the entire planet that whatever happens here affects us all. I can understand why the scientists who are closest to the research believe that our planet has reached a tipping point, beyond which runaway climate change is irreversible. If they're right, there's nothing we can do to stop it. And in fact, I don't believe it matters whether we're approaching the tipping point or it's already happened. The decisions that would have to be taken, such as immediately halting all fossil fuel use, are just so far-reaching that I don't see any way the world's leaders could agree to them in time. If there's nothing that governments can do, I believe it's time for individuals to take things into their own hands. Is there anything that we can do? It's clear to me that we have to dramatically change the way we understand the world, and to make some major shifts in our consciousness if we are to survive this challenge. I have no guarantees, but these are my suggestions for actions any individual can take. Firstly, stop treating our planet as an inanimate object and begin to see it as an intelligent living being, the source of all life that supports and nourishes us. Change the way we treat the planet. Behave towards it with the respect we'd give to a generous benefactor that gives freely. Stop seeing ourselves as the centre of the universe. This involves getting our human egos under control, learning humility and shifting our values to see what is important and what isn't. We need to eliminate hostility, greed, our materialistic addiction to consumption, as well as learning to manage our human emotions of fear, anger, envy, jealousy, shame and guilt. To do this involves a major shift in attitude, which I'm calling submissiveness. Many will find this too hard to accept, as it involves adopting a position of deep humility and unravelling a lifetime of conditioning. Get over the need to be busy all the time, to fill the mind with noise and chatter. Forget social media and instead learn to chill out, to relax and to meditate. Stop drugging yourself so that you don't feel things, whether it's painkillers, alcohol or soporific soap operas. Learn to welcome pain as it has something to teach you. The changes to come are huge and you will feel anger, bewilderment, grief, hopelessness and guilt. Embrace these, as it's only by submitting to them that your consciousness will develop. There are many more suggestions I would like to pass on. We are putting together a book and a program to help you to know what to do. Information will be appearing on our website at www.theresilienceprogram.com.